Hey, and welcome to the DeviantArt podcast. My name is Matt Buholtz, and today we've got in office with us Dave Rapoza. Welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so we've got you here for the Arcane Idol Original Character Challenge, and we had you create some concept art for that, and an example piece to kind of give people a jumping off point and some ideas on what they might be able to create.
Yeah, I got the initial email from you guys asking me about it, and you had some brief ideas, and one of them that I liked was the idea that it could be like a magician, somebody who plays with cards, you know, with obviously like the angle on like the video and everything like that, some like dynamic elements and things.
Yeah.
You know, it's more specific to like, you know, what you all have going for the challenge itself. So I was inspired by that to basically take the idea of some kind of like magician character and put my own spin on it, because initially when you come at something like that, there's the obvious. There's like what you would think of first when you think of magician or somebody who plays with cards, has like magic cards, and you think of Gambit, you think of like other stuff like that.
David Copperfield, Zatanna.
Right.
Yeah.
So I tried to do something a little bit out of the box, try and challenge myself to come up with something just different. So what I like to do is pull from things that I'm interested in, like for the character, I wanted to kind of bring in some cultural elements. I borrowed from the Rabari tribe, which is they're a group in India that's like, they're so beautiful, like everything about them. They're ornamental, like attire, like the jewelry, the clothing, like the robes. It's just so amazing. And you look at something like that, and if you put those people in something like Star Wars, and like you added your own like sci-fi spin to it, something like that, like you would immediately link to them like an expanded universe of like ideas of who they are. And I think that kind of thing is important when you're designing a character. You need some kind of interest that's based in the real world. So I always thought, like when I saw them, that they were kind of like, they had this like mystical element about them, like there's something like the evokes in them, like, oh, there's like it's almost like magic to me. Like maybe it's just because it's something I'm not super familiar with in like day to day, but yeah, I took from that and I just thought that'd be the perfect cultural like jumping off point for this character, because it's just so interesting, and I feel there's a depth to it that kind of lends itself to a very interesting concept. So with that in mind, I took those elements, combined them with more like exaggerated colors, you know, gave the character itself like this like very vibrant like skin tone, just things to pop, and then designed this like orb thing where the cards could be conjured from, like, you know, just added extra like magic elements so that it's not the stereotypical man in a suit doing card tricks, you know, with like, you know,
Yeah.
Like my first thought was probably some dude with like a metal mask, and then like he'd have all this other stuff, and I was just like, I don't want to do something like super corny. So I tried to challenge myself to just go with an idea that takes me a little bit longer to think of, and just something that not everybody would come up with.
Yeah.
So that's kind of it.
Not the one seen in every anime opening.
Right.
Yeah.
That's really the plan.
That's awesome. So when you find something like that, how do you go about like doing research on those sort of cultures to find like the stuff that inspires you, or how do you find those in the first place?
Well, I think it comes from a place of like just who I am, like my interest in things. I'm very much into Baroque design. I like a lot of Gothic cathedrals. I like the design and a lot of the you know, like old Roman kind of style architecture. That kind of thing influences me a lot. Like it's a lot of high detail, like ornament kind of things, and filigree, and just beautiful patterns and all that. So I tend to like lean on cultures that have that integrated into their design. So if I can find that in like, you know, Persian culture, or, you know, like the Rabari, then that's something that already kind of is attractive to me. So when I'm doing characters and they have to have, I don't know, something about them that's me. Like, I like to think of that stuff because if you focus on who you are, what you enjoy, what you're generally like looking at, you say you go to a museum or something and something stands out to you, you're like, oh, that's amazing. Like I went to the Met and they had these pistols, and on the pistols, on the butts of them, they'd have like faces carved into like this, like beautiful little like metal circle thing, and there'd just be like ornate designs all up the handle. Some of them are like double barrel, whatever. Like there are things that are so unique, and you're like, maybe not everybody has seen this. It's like, but to me, like it stands out as something like, it's so cool. I want more people to know what it is. And like how you share interest with anything that you do or anything that you enjoy. It's like, it's fun to take like these little things that you feel like not everybody knows about this. And in that way, it feels new when you bring it into like a fantasy genre or sci-fi or whatever else you're doing. But at the same time, it's grounded because it's part of our humanity. Like, you know that you've kind of seen something like that at some point in your life. You're not sure maybe where, but it has that groundedness where characters that are then in these environments that feel more fantastical feel more real. So that's kind of how I come about, like my choices is just the place of like, what about you and what you enjoy is, unique, whatever, that kind of thing. Like, it doesn't matter if it's specifically based on some kind of like amazing culture or whatever. You just take from your own, unique interests, take all that, put it into a pot. You usually come out with something that at least feels genuine. Genuine is what you're looking for.
Yeah.
And, that works.
And like for your art, it is super detailed. Like every aspect of it is just packed with something. And so do you find that is like something that makes the art more rewarding for yourself to be able to complete that? Or is it something that you enjoy getting to spend the time working on that? Because there's so much extra work, I would assume, that goes into adding that detail.
There is, but in the same way that I'm pulling from things I enjoy visually, I'm also trying to lean into my strengths. A lot of people would get really bored doing that much detail or just think like, that's too much. Like, I'm not going to do all of that. But I love that. Like, if I sit down to do a piece and I know that I'm going to be doing all of these little tiny details and I'm going to be like zooming in and doing, maybe it's too busy sometimes, but that's the challenge, is trying to have that read on the character or the illustration without being so cluttered and messy. I think that when you do a character like that, it's a nice challenge. And yeah, with the ornate things, it's not like a lot of work to me. It's something I feel like it's me, like at my core, who I am, what I love. That's just such a huge part of it that I kind of don't think of it as like a task or like a lot of effort or anything, where somebody else might, but it's not. If it works, it's good.
Yeah.
It could easily be really bad.
That makes sense. So going not so much from a visual aspect, but from a character aspect, like obviously you've worked in comics, you did the Steve Lichman series, like for a character that you design for like a client like this, where it's more of a one-off sort of thing, do you still put in that kind of backstory and more of who this character is as well?
I think about it, yeah. I did portraits for a really long time. Like you mentioned the Ninja Turtles kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And when I did that, I focused so much on personality. And I do that by, like, for instance, with the Ninja Turtles. I related to that so much because that's my childhood, and I had an idea of who they all were. So it was important doing something like that where you just think, how can I get across exactly who I thought these characters were in my head at the time, and like the enthusiasm I had and feeling like I knew them. And Raphael comes to your birthday party and he's less of a jerk than in the cartoon, and you're like, that's not Raphael. It's like, how can you make them like unique to what they are? And like through the portraits, I really kind of got a grounded idea that I kept thinking about it. And I did so many series of things like, He-Man, and I had Thundercats. I focus so much on the characterization in their faces. So when I do any kind of character now and it's full body, it doesn't matter. I think a lot about what's behind their expression, who they are. I'll spend the most time on an expression. That comes from the comics too.
Yeah.
Because so much of how someone emotes is just like little tiny subtle movements. Like you can lose some really subtle intensity by not focusing correctly on like little brow movements. In Steve Lichman, which is comedy comic, like so many jokes need to land based on expression and reactions. That's a huge part of it. So I spend a lot of time with like a mirror, or, in the beginning especially, to see how I would do it. It's a lot of acting, and you get so much character in tiny little, you look at people. It's the first thing you see is a face. You're attracted to eyes first. So you see that in like hand gestures. You get so much information from those that if you don't put a good amount of time and effort into who they are, their character, backstory, whatever you want to call it, you're going to lose a lot of depth. And that goes so far in making a character believable. Like you can easily lose that by just doing the generic thing, and then the character doesn't feel so memorable, I guess.
What would you say some of the hardest expressions are to convey?
Disdain.
Yeah.
Sarcasm. Like a slight disgust, but you're being polite kind of thing. like a
And you can freeze frame
smile.
that and like zoom in. Now you've got a reference that you can use.
I feel like that's, especially in a comic, that's really important. And if you're doing comedy where it's supposed to be subtle, then the main character, Steve Lichman's a skull.
Yeah.
So making that skull emotive, I got so used to drawing very subtle shifts in bone. And through that, I ended up making him a little bit more elastic just to get across what I wanted. But doing those little things, you start to realize what you can really get across with like a tiny pixel movement.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, wow, like I could have missed that. And yeah, it's all about the tiniest little things. And you get used to it. Like, done over 700 pages of comics in the Steve universe. So like, I'm so used to drawing those things that, yeah, you get better at it. But because the story depends so much on the reactions, it just became a part of like everything I did. And now when I do singular illustrations, I think so much more about that. Before I didn't. My default expressions were anger and like smiling. Hey, what's going on? I'm a goblin. Like, there were those. And
the what's going on, I'm a goblin is like a character I want to see like explored more.
oh man, me too. I always thought about that when I wanted to first get into being like a realistic artist. My main goal was to get to a place where I was so good at like rendering and design and execution of these pieces that you would accept the dumbest shit. Like that I could do the dumbest stuff possible and you'd be like, but it's so well done. That was my goal. So when I think about the goblin thing, I'm like, oh, it just reminds me of that goal. I still have to get there. I have to get there where I can just do kind of what I do in Steve, but like full illustrations that are like, I just want to, if I could be a master, like just a master Michelangelo, whatever level artist, and just, like a skeleton pounding like beer and stuff on like a dirt bike, like punching someone in the face and just hanging up in a church.
I mean, yeah, you gotta get that like full wall size gold frame, very ornate, like
just beautiful,
like
undeniable.
Pyros shoot up around it too.
Yeah, I want the Pope to pay me for it. Well,
it's cool, Pope. You have a chance.
Yeah, that's true. It is cool, Pope. But yeah, that I don't know. It's very difficult to kind of like get across in a character design the things that you have in your head. That was always the struggle for me starting out, is I'd always have an image in my head of what I wanted the thing to be. And I think a lot of people starting out have this same thing where you can't really get across exactly how you see the thing that you want to do. And the more I'm like drawing, doing comics, focusing on character expression, focusing on my drawings and anatomy and that whole skill set, because I was so bad about that. I wanted to skip right to painting. I think a lot of artists do. Whatever is the flashy, fun stuff is what you want to jump right into. And I let myself lean on that for a really long time. And I stopped and I kind of backed up from that. And I just focused on drawing for, I think, 4 or 5 years, like straight. I just did nothing but that. Like I made sure all of my jobs were leaning towards that. I kind of gave up painting, like even though I got most of my work that way in the beginning. And I did a lot of things through, you know, big like advertising, flashy, fully real looking things. That was like my main source of income. I had to walk away from that because it was such a weakness. And the only way I'm able to do stronger characters now is because I stopped and did a whole lot of drawing, which I think is the heavy lifting that you kind of avoid, especially if you're like me, where I was afraid of like sharing stuff that wasn't very good. And if anything's successful now in my work that maybe wasn't like a few years ago, it's because I walked away and made myself do the difficult thing, which is hard to do now. I think it's interesting with Instagram, Twitter, all these platforms. People share this perfect idea themselves. But in reality, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of failing over and over and over and doing the wrong thing, having to look bad. And, you know, maybe you don't like what you do, but all of that's necessary. If you just were great all the time, you wouldn't be learning.
Yeah.
And I think now when I see my character work and illustrations recently, I've been doing a lot of Marvel and I'm back working for Magic the Gathering. Things come together so much easier for me because I'm not leaning on so many crutches. And I more bring this up because I know a lot of people doing this challenge.
Yeah.
It might seem there's some kind of expectation to be great. And I wouldn't want that to be the case, that you feel that you can't start because you're not amazing or living up to some other artist. But I would want to say that, you know, where I'm at right now and being able to execute things that actually work, I think that all comes from failing, just being okay with that, not caring what everybody else says. You know, when I first stopped doing my paintings, I only started drawing. The only comments I got were, "Stop doing that. These are really bad. We want you to do paintings." I got so much of that, and I just didn't listen to it. I was like, well, who cares? I'm just going to keep doing what I know I need to do to improve. You know, you don't want to go to the gym and work out all the time, but you're not going to get results if you don't.
I often don't go to the gym, but it shows.
Yeah, I think that stuff's so important.
What made you make that decision that you were going to make that hard choice to like just be focusing on your drawing and focus on the anatomy and really do the hard stuff?
Because you run into the same problems over and over and over with yourself. You always hit the same wall. If you don't recognize what the problem is, then, you know, you're just denying yourself something great. And even though those things can seem difficult and making yourself vulnerable can feel like you can get embarrassed, or especially if you're like, I felt like I had a pretty good following at the time. And I remember thinking, who cares? Like, if I keep doing this, then nothing's going to change. I'm not going to become better. I need to do the thing I'm not doing. So I feel if I didn't have that kind of confidence, which I feel like I do have confidence. I know it's right to do that, but I get why you wouldn't do it, because it's so daunting to be a public person, want to have the image that you're great, and then suddenly do the thing you can't do, and publicly, and have everyone be like, oh, that's not something you're good at. And even when I started writing like comics, and I got, most people are supportive, but you still get the thing of like, oh, you're not good at that. What are you doing?
Yeah.
But to improve, you just have to lean into it and be like, well, failure. I have to keep failing. I have to do that over and over. I mean, I'm not sure if I fully answered your question, but
no, I think that's a good point. Like, social media can be so daunting to show like the work. And we were talking about that a little bit earlier today, like conceptart.org, right? Like, it used to be such a good place to show the progress and like really work and learn as a community. And now everything is such a polish, like across all social media. You see like almost exclusively finished product.
Right.
And to be able to go back and say like, here's what I need to like focus on, and here's how I can like up my game overall, is kind of a really cool step that you took, and like definitely will help other people see that sort of journey is something that happens. Because if all you see is finished product always, you're never going to think that those steps existed.
I wish that there were a place for sharing that part of the journey, because those platforms are a big place of whatever client work you get. They come through there. So there is that risk of looking bad. But at the same time, if you want to stay part of the algorithm and exist and have your work pop up, you need something to share. So that something to share, hopefully, is the challenge that you give yourself to say, I don't care what people think of me. I want to be the best version of me. And if that means just playing the wrong notes over and over and over and over and over instead of being perfect, then that's just what it takes. There's the immediate pleasure of putting something on the internet that you know will work because it's your strength. And that's, that works. And maybe that's your niche, and that'll lead to success. But then there's the long term of doing the thing that is bad, that maybe you feel like is the weakest part of yourself. But that'll lead to you becoming great. Like, you'll become something better than you thought you could be. That's the harder step. It's the most rewarding, though. Yeah. Doing those comics was not something that I felt was very easy. Over a couple of years, even though they look silly comics, simple drawings, it was very hard for me to do that much. And doing 3 pages a day on that comic,
which is ridiculous. 3 pages a day is like insanity.
Yeah. Well, you set a parameter for yourself delivering on a product like that, and that was just what it was. That was the deadline, and I did the math, and that was it. But I didn't like it at the time. It was brutal. It felt awful. It's like, but at the end, oh my God. Now when I sit down and I have an idea, it's in my head, I can draw almost what's in my head. I've never been able to do that in my life. And I value that so much. And I think like every day, what if I never did a Kickstarter and made a comic that was out of my comfort zone, not something I do. I don't even make comics, really. I just was an illustrator. I didn't even write, really. I just did it for fun. What if I never did that? Where would I be? What would I be doing? Like, that's a scary thought.
Yeah. Something that kind of comes to mind when you say that, and like pushing yourself in that direction, and something that is kind of being done well on social media is the idea around like monthly challenges and stuff, which kind of gives people an excuse to suck at something or try something new. It's kind of like a little safety zone. Like you go into like Inktober or Mermaid or whatever, and it forces you outside of that comfort zone. Like, how do you feel about those sort of situations?
They're very self-directed.
That's true.
So it's on you to rise to it.
Mm-hmm.
I was watching the Drew Struzan DVD where he makes the Hellboy poster. It's old.
He's incredible.
Yeah.
We got to talk to him last year, and he's just like spectacular.
Yeah, he's amazing. He's one of the best. So one thing I took away from what he said in the DVD, which was, it just hit me pretty hard because it made so much sense. It's pretty obvious, but one thing he touched on was that he tries to make the image look finished at every step, which means that his foundation, his drawing, his sketch, everything, they're exactly what it's going to be in the end. But he could stop at any time and it'd be done. And I thought about that a lot, and I just thought it's such an admirable thing. I like it because he's such a high-level person. His skill is so amazing that he would do that for everything. So I think about that when I'm working. Like, it doesn't matter what the job is. It doesn't matter if it's a challenge. I'm going to do this piece that looks like my best work and finished at every level. Take it seriously. Because I feel like there's a tendency, at least I had this, when I would do challenges back in the day, like, 10 years ago. I treated it like a challenge. I didn't treat it like client work. I didn't take it seriously. It was just fun. And fun's fine. But if all you have is fun and you don't have the seriousness of like legacy, do you want to be somebody who just gives half of their best because something is a challenge that doesn't have super high stakes? Or do you want to treat everything as if it has your name attached to it and is important to you in some way? I think when you start to treat things that way, that's kind of the vibe I got from like Drew's whole approach. Was it's important that it looks complete, and the execution is there in everything that he does. It looks great. So I think it's important to treat your work that way. So when you do a challenge, to take it seriously. So in that way, if you come at those and you treat them like that, then it can be an amazing way to improve, because the prompts are fun and it's a great way to build out your portfolio. You can come up with some really good pieces. Some of those, even like the random name generators for it.
Yeah.
Like, if you've ever seen those like competition things where they have like this character concept creator.
Yeah.
Throw out a few things. If you take that seriously enough, you can make some amazing portfolio pieces. But if everything's a speed paint or everything is fun and play, and maybe a better way to say it is that, let's say for me, I always knew I had something in me where I could create something better than what I'm doing. And I felt like I was waiting for an excuse all the time before I actually took the step and did it. Like I was waiting for somebody, like a movie studio to reach out and say, do our poster. And then you can be the best you can be, because it's a poster and it's supposed to be good.
Right.
And the reason the Drew thing hit me so hard is because nobody's really going to give you that opportunity. You have to create it. You have to always be working as if you're in that place with that challenge. And if you can treat those things that way, I think they're really valuable, especially if you're not taking client work, because I wasn't when I started, and I did those.
Yeah.
But you should always finish them and do your best work. That'll lead to, great things later on, hopefully.
Yeah, there's a level of respect to the work that you're putting in at that point. Like you're not just doing something to get it done.
Right. I would see artists take part in the ones on conceptart.org back in the day, and you'd see their work and think, who are you doing this for? Like, this is just for fun? Like, what? It's amazing. Bumsky, Min Yum, he is an artist who did that. I just admire his work so much, and especially coming up and growing up in that, I would always look at him and think, wow, if I could do that. He'd always win the character of the week challenges. So he sticks out in my mind as somebody who took it seriously when he didn't have to, and leads to really good things. So
it's crazy thinking back to like watching people come up and through with their artwork as well, because things change so much over time, and even the way that art is seen, like the stuff that, you know, we're going back now, we're hitting almost 20 years on DeviantArt, and we're going back through like old years and like what were the daily deviations back in the day, and just seeing the way that art has changed with like digital art or traditional art having kind of its ups and downs. It's been really interesting seeing that variation over time too. And part of, I imagine, staying in a place where you're challenging yourself is really adapting to the way that like the culture is moving around art as well.
it's difficult to stay relevant, I think, especially when you get older. You have to have a genuine interest in culture. I'm still a fan of so many things, and I love new things. I love finding new artists. One of my favorite ways, I feel to stay relevant, you need to break away from what you're used to. And like I said, when I stopped and I did comics, I started getting into a lot of comic artists and then a lot of indie comic artists. And you see what people are doing right now, and you can stay in your bubble if you're not, too careful. That can be a bit dangerous for growth and also staying current, because if you work within those parameters, let's say in concept art, which is where I kind of come from, if you only did what concept artists were interested in, then you're only, it's like you're playing to concept artists, and that's not the people who consume work for illustrators. That's regular people who might not have any interest in doing any art. They don't look at skill the same way. They don't look at how well you rendered an eyeball. That's not what they see. They see strength in designs and things. And I always bring up Street Fighter 2, and you see these characters made up of 3 colors and a silhouette that's very strong. Mm-hmm. It's part of the reason why the challenge we're doing has those parameters involved in it, because that really matters in identifying a character. So you have to know what people are into, and you have to take in a lot of different points of inspiration. And I would say one of the best exercises is just try new things, like expand out, see what animators are doing, see what, like I said, indie comic artists are doing. And then there's like pulp artists, there's people that don't necessarily fit in a box perfectly. They might not fit in a concept art box. You might not be able to go to one site over another and find this genre of art. Sometimes I'll come upon somebody on Instagram that does like a mix of anime and then like more of like a Marvel style, and they'll take all of that, combine it, and it's this whole new thing. And this kind of artist may not be working on AAA video games, but people eat it up. People love it. And you see how those things just blow up online, become viral.
Yeah.
In a way.
So let's take a minute then. Like you were saying, you have found a lot of artists that you're really enjoying, new artists or artists in different genres. Let's just drop some names. Let's give people some people to follow.
Some people to follow.
Because I think that I'm always searching for new people. I'm on DA, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Twitter, I'm on wherever I can find art, because I just love consuming art. That's a big thing for me.
I'll probably butcher some names.
That's
but
fine. We'll get them written down, and I'll have you send me the links, and then we'll link them below. So,
like one person that I saw, who is it? It's okay. Instead of dropping specific names, which I have a couple, but I'll just mention what they do. There's one person on Instagram, I think the name involves like cherry. They have really beautiful, almost like animatics, like rotating videos of just a simple animation with music. It's like an 80s aesthetic. It's kind of VHS. You know what I'm talking about?
I know exactly who you're talking about. Yeah, because they have like the like slight drip or like a little distortion flicker.
A few people do this. It's one of the things I really like, which is taking advantage of the platform. It's something like a client might not ask for that, but you're putting it up on Instagram where you can do these little short videos. And it's just a loop of an animation. And it's just so cool with like some atmospheric music. I follow a lot of people who do that. I think, is it Anna Kadish? Am I saying that right? Do you know what I'm talking about?
I'm not 100% sure.
She has like an iconic character.
Yeah.
This one's kind of anime mixed with gorillas. It's got their own original music. A lot goes into it. It's beautiful, super cool, and it's very relevant. I feel like it's culturally relevant when people do work like that. It resonates with people beyond art. I think that that's a huge part of it, is basically getting outside of your bubble. Not that you need to copy these people. I don't mean that, but you see what everyone's into, and then you become a fan. And you see like, oh, why do people like this? And when you see why people like things, you kind of, you get a little bit more information about the general public if you are in your own little space that you don't wander out of. So I've been able to, I feel, expand a bit, just taking a break from my own thing, taking a break from concept art. I don't really look at those artists. I love those artists, but I'm not like searching it out. I've seen a lot of it. It's my world.
Yeah.
Go see other worlds, and then take the things that you find and bring it back. And then you have something that hopefully bridges those gaps. You create a whole new thing for people to like and enjoy. I think that that's pretty important.
That's awesome. Speaking of going like kind of outside comfort zone, find things in different areas, the comedy writing that you had to do for like Steve Lichman, like that's a very different thing that a lot of artists will find themselves doing. So how did you kind of get into that, and where did you get those ideas from? Or how did you even develop getting into there?
Man. Used to trash stuff all the time.
Yeah.
So you work in fantasy, and fantasy is so into itself. It feels very much like, it's like incestuous, where like, come on, after a certain point, a wizard's not cool. Like Gandalf, you can only do so many iterations of Gandalf, and then you're just kind of like, all right,
he's
done
gray,
with that.
He's white.
Yeah, and how can you take it so seriously too? Like I had a hard time with that. I did so much fantasy art. I worked for D&D, I worked for Magic. You see, like, it's like the nerdy stuff. I grew up with nerdy stuff, but I also grew up like making fun of it, self-deprecating. So it wasn't that much of a stretch, because every time I'd be working on some like overly serious brief on some kind of lonely, sad skeleton or something like that lost its wife, who cares? I would then talk to my friend Dan, who I wrote Steve with, and we would just riff on it like, man, like, how can you really, after this much, be so into these cheesy ideas without making fun of it? I can't do it. And like, I joke around all the time, so having to sit there and make believe like I don't think it's funny how lame some of it is, it was just, I'm not going to do that. So as a joke, and to just kind of take a break from everything, we thought, if a lich, this like undead wizard dude, if you're immortal, how bad would you want to die? Like after the like 10,000th warrior came down with some big dumb elaborate speech about how they were going to slay you or whatever, like after that happens for how many times in a row, like would you just want somebody to kill you? Like just end it, just have it be all over. And we did one thing, and then it blew up online. People just went, the line was, the meme became, just fucking kill me then, with him just shrugging like, I'm done with it. And that was so popular that we thought, oh, let's just do more of this. So we just borrowed everything from our childhoods. And I realized when people say, do the thing you love,
Yeah.
I kind of didn't even think about it. Oh, the thing I love is making jokes with my friend. How come that's not what I do too? I don't need to be an artist.
It's not exactly what like the high school counselor says when you're like taking your job placement.
Dude, my high school counselor said, you're not going to do anything with your life. I was second lowest in my class. My best friend was the lowest. So he just brought me into the class and I was like, am I going to be able to go to college? And he was like, nah, man, that's not for you. Think of some other shit to do. And I was like, cool. You're a really good counselor.
And here you are now.
Yeah. No, but we just took all the stuff that we made fun of as kids in our hometown. And, I live with like a dude who basically did the Goodbye Horses thing from Silence of the Lambs. They walked in on him doing that dance. Yeah. It wasn't good. Yeah, I'd seen so much, and our town was very much backwoods. We drive trucks into trees. We'd, have pit parties and lots of, like, for lack of a better term, lots of redneck fun. Really enjoyed it. Blowing things up, jumping off of cliffs.
Yeah,
Getting
the usual.
Chased. Yeah, chased by dogs.
You learn
really
how to shake a scent real early.
Yeah, I was hiding in the woods and chased by dogs. That was pretty scary. That was one of the scariest things. But I liked like a lot of the dark humor stuff. I liked a lot of the, like interesting characters. People who have like a lot of depth. They have, these funny little things about them. And you just take them and you bring them into Steve in this comic universe that we started to create. Where you're like, let's just funnel all of these ideas from these stories that we've been telling our whole lives. People love when we tell the stories, so why can't we make a thing about it? There's so many things happened when I was a kid that I always think, like all these interesting relatives, whoever, my Uncle Steve had a license plate that just said Jesus, and he was a motorcycle, and he would just show up. He's like, sorry, Steve, if you're listening to this. He was like borderline homeless, and he'd just like show up. He'd smell like musk. He'd like live at our house for a little while, tell me crazy wild shit about his life, and then take off. And he's like a ghost. And like I love people like that. And if I can take, he'd be like, hey, David. He talked to me like that all the time. Him and my aunt have like almost the same voice. And he would be like, David, how you doing? She talked to me like that. Super Boston-y.
Yeah.
Everybody has that like hard New England accent. And I loved being able to like take a break from all the overly serious, whatever illustration things I did and just have fun. Take the universe I know, that fantasy, and bring me into it. Bring my life, bring my friend Dan's life, talk about just crazier things, have characters that embody a lot of that.
What's an example of like a one-to-one where you put something from your life into the comic?
Oof. There's a lot of subtle stuff. One of the bigger ones is, you're around a lot of conspiracy people.
Oh, yeah.
Especially if you're in a small town.
I mean, it makes sense. The world is flat. Moon landing's fake.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I like that. That's probably the most obvious one that I feel like people can relate to, is that people are, thinking that like they're not real. They have to, like a crazy conspiracy person who's like not even sure that they're a human being anymore.
It's all the simulation.
Like, yeah, exactly. And they're like, I need to hurt somebody to know that it's real.
I don't know if you noticed,
like
but
that.
all of the conference rooms here are named after like locations from conspiracy theories.
Is it really?
Yeah, we got the simulation. We got Bermuda Triangle. We've got Bigfoot's hideout.
Yeah. Do you have lizard people?
No, but they just run the place, so we couldn't name it after them.
Yeah, they're just the ones you guys just go out and eat babies every once in a while.
Oh yeah, that's
Gold.
that's why the site's green. It's
Oh, that makes perfect sense.
it's all there. It's in front of you the whole time.
Yeah, you melt down gold bars, you eat it.
You see
eat a
this
little kid.
triangle. That's Illuminati, obviously.
The eye's lower than.
Yeah. Well, it's here. We did the math. So triangle plus I equals this. It's all in front of you the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
Pull back the wool, sheep.
Yeah, and then you have a secret base underneath here.
Yeah, well, you tap this twice and it just folds up.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that
Anyway, the people from the hometown with the tinfoil hats.
I'm more paused because I try and think of what I can and can't talk about. What is something that somebody from my hometown would hear and be like, oh, that's me? Because that's already happened.
Okay. Yeah.
That's happened before where, like, I once drew a cat that gets drunk and talks about very specifically, like, hey, I'm not an alcoholic, but man, if you get however many of these whiskey nips, they add up. It's a little bit cheaper than the bottle that's the same amount. So it was very specific. And then this kid that I was friends with, he read 3 comics before that.
Yeah.
He read 3 of them and he was laughing. Laughing in the comments, like, ha, 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 these are great, man. And then the next one, ha, 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 that's so good. And the next one he laughs, and then he sees that one, and he just says, oh, shit. Because that's something he literally said to my friend. We just took it word for word, and it played as comedy. So we were like, let's just use it.
Well, you did the smart choice then of pulling back something you were already in the doghouse for.
Yeah, it's something that I already burned.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. But there's a few of those. You take them and you try and put a veil on them enough where there's some distance, and you're like, it has to be real. The problem is it has to be real. Like, there's certain things that you can do. Like, I'll tell a story, and there's this dude, like, I like desperate people. Funny, like, I need to be liked. They make me laugh a lot. So there was this dude, my art teacher died when I was a kid. I wanted her. It's like my brother, my sister's art teacher. She passed away, sadly. The person who replaced her was the history teacher's son. Now, he has no place there because he doesn't do it. He doesn't teach, and he's just the worst. So he shows up at our school, and he's like giving cigarettes to the kids, like all this stuff. And we're like, wait, come on. Like, he just, you know what I mean? Wanted to be liked.
Yeah.
And that's funny to me, that kind of desperation. So anyway, we get to this point where me and my buddy Dan, who I write the book with, we were between classes. We used to go to the art room all the time because we both drew. And we'd hang out there because it was comfortable, you know? You have your favorite classes, all that. And he was very lenient, you know, like I said, lets kids smoke cigarettes. So we're in there, and something happened. Dan criticized him on something, and he turned and punched Dan. He punched him real hard. It made me, you know, it's funny, but I grabbed a T-square, and I spun around, and I hit him in the balls with it. And then he fell on the ground, and we just started kicking him. And then, you know, it didn't really. I'll tell you the rest of the story. So he basically, he didn't end up, you know, getting us in any kind of trouble because he hit my friend, which is insane.
Yeah.
A teacher punching a student.
Do that.
But what ended up coming of it was, you know, you get these little funny stories, and you know, with that dude, like, I take elements from everybody. There are pieces of everyone from my school, from my family. To not offend anyone, you take little chunks, little stories, things that are whatever, and then you plug them into one. And then none of them get offended. Because they go, oh, that's not me. That's an amalgamation of a bunch of people. That could never be me. But, you know, you still have points where my dad would tell me when I was a kid, I went out into the woods and I started walking a lot, and now I feel like I have more energy. And I was like, that's called getting exercise and being in better shape. And he was amazed by it. He was like, I didn't know that you could just walk and feel better. And I was like, Everybody knows that, man. Everybody knows that. That's how you get better.
And if you didn't, now you know, and that's what this podcast is all about.
Yeah, it's about improving. I have one with my brother. Like, I take these things, like my brother, and this is not specific, but you kind of lean into attitudes. Me and my brother hiked to the top of a mountain, right? 11,000 feet. You're out of breath. The air's thin. So we're both tired, and my brother looks at me and he goes, you know what you do? You got to take in as much air as possible. So then he starts breathing really fast. And I'm like, literally, what you're doing right now is called hyperventilating, and you're going to pass out. And he was like, nah, you got to get in as much air as you can. Because that way, you stay oxygenated. And I was like, that's so crazy stupid, but I love it. And I'm going to use it at some point. And then, we also have bear mace. And my brother doesn't know what bear mace is. I know what bear mace is. I know what regular mace is. We go up to this state trooper or, the forest ranger, whatever. And
I'm terrified right now where this is going.
No. Then the forest ranger goes, so you know what bear mace is? You know how to use it? Like kind of what it is, whatever. My brother goes, yeah, it's bear pee. We spray it all over ourselves to make the bears go away. And I'm like, we don't both believe that. Like, I'm not him. Like, we're not a mirror of each other. Just because I know him and we're here together doesn't mean I thought that too. But that's what he thought going into it. And I was like, that's one of the dumbest things.
What if you hadn't been there? And he was like, well, time to get safe.
I'll tell you what would have happened if I hadn't been there. Because later on that day, we go out hiking and we come across a grizzly bear. And my brother just goes, what you gonna do is we just got to sit on the side of the path. We don't spray it. We don't do nothing. And I'm like, let it eat us? And he's just sitting there like, yo, you can't be aggressive towards the bear. And I'm like, you're going to kill both of us. And I'm not. I'm going to spray it with the bear mace. That's what the bear mace is. It's a grizzly bear. And we see this thing running up the hill. Like, we're on a trail. It's up ahead. It's right down there. It's running up. It looks like somebody took a furry blanket and was doing this with it across his back. It's just like rippling. And I was like, oh, it's an SUV covered in raw meat, like with a blanket. It's so insane. And I'm scared. My brother's just going, just lay down, man. I'm like, I don't want to just give up. Like, I'm not done living. So I take things like that, like anything that makes me laugh, any kind of funny, very like personal, situational thing. You take the elements of those, bring them in, and then characters feel more relatable. They feel like, oh, I know this person. Mm-hmm. So the more specific you can get on things that everybody kind of knows, that's my favorite. I get a lot of things where people say, I love that, but I feel like you're talking about me right now. And I hate myself for it. And I'm like, yeah, that's what you try and do. That's what makes it relatable and fun, So, yeah, just a couple examples.
That's amazing. I'm glad you're alive. I'm glad your brother still has vision. If you haven't been there, that bear mace in the eyes.
My brother's so funny. Yeah, I'm glad that he didn't get to do what he wanted.
Oh my God. So as those characters progress, though, like the characters in Steve Lichman do have like arcs as well. So how do you build out those arcs when maybe the people that have stagnated in a way?
I mean, maybe this is kind of like corny, but I try to do it in a way where like what I would want for them or what they might do that would be even worse. Like if you take an extreme person and then you kind of, like you can correct them almost. It's almost like if you could go back into your childhood and just shake the person that you like, oh, come on, don't just be like crazy. Like figure it out. And you can make them figure it out in a way. Or like give someone in your life confidence or something, That's kind of how we approach it is like, I feel like at least that's a part of it because they're not all like uplifting stories, obviously.
Right, yeah.
But with certain arcs, there's that. And with other arcs, like with, I don't want to spoil too much.
No, but you can read the entire webcomic beneath.
Yeah.
We'll add the links. You can also get the books.
Yeah.
Amazing.
We have, without spoiling it, I won't spoil it, but there's a character who's we do that with, where we have friends. Everybody has someone in their life where they grow up and they have big ego, a big image of themselves. They think that they're like the shit and all this, and then they find out, hopefully, that they're not in life because life hits them. And we have that character in like Dracula, who's just like a regular Dracula, which is the point of it, just so stupid and like old-fashioned. He's stuck in the past, but he wants to be this relevant, of the time, hip teenager that goes to all the parties and stuff, but he's an old man. He's a creep. Vampires in general are just...
Yeah, they're the creeps of the fantasy world, for sure.
You can't creep in people's bedrooms and do whatever you want. Suck blood and get out, So they're bad people. And we kind of take those like elements, plug it into this old character, make him this creepy weirdo, take our friends, the ego, whatever, and then you go, what would ultimately happen to this person if they really got what they deserved in some way? Like a real life lesson. And then you take them and you just go, crash. And I think you borrow from other things. Like you take like, you want a tragic story, I would take like a breakup. And for me, like going through like a serious breakup or, anybody, but specifically for somebody who lives at home, works from home, you go through a breakup and then you go into this spiral of eating all of the chips and staying up and then being like, oh man, I'm so tired from staying up so late. I can't really make myself anything healthy. I'm going to keep eating like all this crap. And then you watch this whole thing happen. And that happens to, one of our characters. I borrow that from, both of our lives. Like me and my buddy Dan, we're super self-deprecating. So we take like an arc like that where how did we get out of this? Like how did we start having a higher opinion of ourselves, stop treating ourselves like crap, and just turn your life around? So like, that was one of them. It was just, when you get all greasy from, like I used to think that I'd eat so much pizza and it'd be like 4 a.m. and I'd be like, am I sweating pizza grease? Like, what is this? Like it's like I'm slimy. Like, when your face smells like pizza? It's like you eat so much pizza that all you smell is pizza grease. That's what it was like.
when you can smell the pizza on your own breath, you might have a problem.
Or when the delivery person starts bringing you free stuff because they're like, you're such a good guy to us. Here's the free, 2-liter. And that would happen to me too much. Like they'd bring like free desserts and things. They're like, you've been supporting us for so long. Every day, man. I don't know what it is.
I love the delivery people in my neighborhood though. Like except there was one time where we used to order from the same sushi place all the time. Mm-hmm. And finally we're driving and we're like, oh God, there's the place. Like, let's actually go there. And we went in and we sat down at the table and we're ordering and the waitress comes over. She's like, oh, you're the people from this address, right? And we're like, oh yeah, that is us. And we're like, that's a nice thing. And she goes, I didn't recognize you without your robe on. I was like, how do I wear a robe like frequently?
Like, are you talking about a robe or just depression in general? Because I just put that on.
Both, apparently. Like I didn't even realize that I wore robes. I was just like, what happened here?
Yeah, no. I watched one skit once that I related to so hard, and I feel like I keep these mental notes of like, oh, that's great. I'm gonna do something like that. Like I love how personal that is. Where this dude ordered so much Thai food delivery, and there was like this beautiful woman who came to like deliver the Thai food, and his whole place looked like trash. And then he would just around his door just clean up all the trash out of the way, and then open it and go, oh, hi.
And that's that sliver of safe.
That's how it felt. Like every time I'm like, I don't even want the pizza man to judge me. Like I'm judging myself too much right now. Like I can't have you. And I'd have like all these deadlines. I'd be working for advertisers. So I do advertising for movies. And they would call me at, this happened all the time, like 8 p.m. I'm like, no, I'm not going to go to bed, anything else. I don't have kids or nothing at the time. So I just am sitting there and I'm like, oh, so you need it by tomorrow? I'm like, so am I just not gonna, all right, I won't go to bed then. And then I just order food. I'd stay up. I get gross. Things would get really wild. All the kids in my neighborhood in Boston would be like partying and throwing glass bottles at my window, like right outside my window going, USA, USA. And I'm just sitting there like, is this what it's going to be like? So that kind of thing, yeah. I love taking from that stuff. You know, if we're going back to the character thing, it's like taking that character, here's how you get out. Just get out. Like I feel so many miles away from that, having like a kid and like real family. I'm like, what was that? What was that freelance world where you suddenly, like my friend Dan talked about living in isolation so long that he would walk into the bathroom and see himself in the mirror just alone and go, like just looking up, and then that would make him laugh alone. And he'd go, oh my God, what am I doing? And he'd be like, you're spiraling, man. That's what happens.
Just that conversation where the mirror talks back.
Yeah, there's so many funny moments when you're isolated from people, being like a freelancer, living that kind of life for so long, that like those weird things where your brain starts to like wander off. You're like, oh, I haven't talked to a person. And you're like, 3 months? What's my family doing? I feel like stranded on like a boat somewhere. Like, I don't know what's going on. Like I haven't seen the real world in a while. And then you start doing like crazy stuff like that. And I don't know. Thankfully, I had other people in my life that were like doing the same thing. Like Dan, he would tell me stories about like bringing groceries to his apartment and having like this girl he was like, he really liked, and he'd like see her all the time, whatever. And then he dropped his grocery bag ripped in front of her when he was carrying his groceries, and then she went to help him, and then while he was helping her pick up the groceries, his pants fell down. And I'm like, that's the perfect level of darkness that really shapes and rounds a person.
Yeah.
And adds some nice story elements, you know?
Yeah, sometimes that reality is just almost too fake to be real. And it lends itself perfectly to a story.
Comedy.
Yeah, that's
lends
comedy.
Itself perfectly to comedy. Where everybody can feel it. They know it's based on something real. But, it sucked to be that person.
So yeah, we were talking a little bit earlier, and you've been on DA for a long time. Like years and years and years.
Since before I ever even truly considered art to be any kind of career. As far as a footprint goes online, I think DeviantArt is the furthest back you can go, because all the other forums that I was on just tanked. They are gone. Like all my work that I used to do for that kind of thing, like I worked for like a couple like small video game forums, and then I did like little character concepts, like anime stuff, and then I put a lot of things on DeviantArt, and I even have a profile, and this is a secret.
Oh.
It's Mr. Delicious. I think it's Mr. Delicious and then some kind of satanic 666 or something like that. If you look on there.
We won't tell the comm ops team. Can't have more than one account.
If that's still there, which I think it might be, that's the earliest posts I have like on a whole internet for art.
Those ones are just very rudimentary scrawls.
But even then, my current account has stuff going back to well over like 12 years ago plus.
That's super cool, because like a lot of people are doing like the decade challenge online, you know, and they're like, I was able to find some of my old stuff on DeviantArt, and it's like, yeah, there it is. Like it's still there. Like some of your stuff, man, like I remember following you when you posted the realistic Ninja Turtles. Like that was a huge series that you did. And even with that, you got to talk with Kevin Eastman, yeah?
Yeah, creator of Ninja Turtles. That was a weird moment, because you do something like that, you don't really think it's. I hoped it would go somewhere.
Yeah.
Let me put it that way.
Yeah.
I had an idea of, what if I did my memory of what they were? When you're a little kid and you're playing with the toys, you have some idea set of, oh, what are these characters like? So I thought, what if I just grew up with that same idea I had playing with the toys and illustrated what I thought they were? How cool and like tough, and like now when I look at it, I'm not like, there's so much I would change, but everybody's kind of like that with their art. But I look at it and I go like, oh, it's super serious. But I was really happy at the time. I was like, I hope this turns into something. I had no idea it would ever get to the point where the person who made the Ninja Turtles saw it. So when that happened, that was pretty wild. I was surprised, super flattered. I got to talking with him just a little. He was really into it. I think that he thought it was in line with like the old comics. Like if you remember the old original Ninja Turtles, they're all like
black and
very
white,
serious. Like Casey Jones is this big tough guy, and I resonated with that as a kid. I loved that stuff. So that was pretty amazing. I mean, eventually I ended up working on the second Ninja Turtles movie, not the Secret of the Ooze, but the later one, and that was really cool. I got to design. I finally got to realize all of that is like a nice closing thing to really officially work on something Ninja Turtles related, because that's really all I had done since then. It was, I did those realistic things, and then I eventually got to do some more realistic stuff for the movie. So I got to design Bebop and Rocksteady, Krang. I got to design my version of like Casey Jones, which didn't really make it to the movie, but I did like a really old school like denim jacket, like
nice
hockey stick, like all that stuff. So that was a really cool moment in my life. It felt, anytime that kind of thing happens where you do something and then somehow or another the creator comes out and finds it, that's amazing.
Yeah, that's one of those ones where, like Angelo, who is the creator of DeviantArt, like you guys know Spud, like he was so excited when he heard you were coming, because I know that he followed that project too and was really like into that at the time. So
I had no idea that the person who like ran DeviantArt cared at all about the Ninja Turtles portraits I did. So I'm surprised to hear that. It's a really cool thing. That's nice.
Next time we get you in, we'll make sure it's not a time where he's traveling. We'll get you guys in the same room to chat Ninja Turtles and how cool Casey Jones is.
Yeah, that'd be really good. One other time, a creator of a property reached out to me after I did something for it. It wasn't as like polished as the Ninja Turtles, and it wasn't necessarily in line with the IP, but I did a little thing involving Garfield.
I was wondering if it was going to be that.
So call it what you will. It's a Garfield, for lack of a better term, manga. It's very dark.
There are other terms used to describe it.
Well, of course. So, believe it or not, I'm a Garfield enthusiast. I grew up with Garfield, legit. One of the first things I ever did was make my own Garfield comics. I made full Garfield comic books. That's my first foray into comics.
Okay.
Is Garfield. I would bind them. I would do tape over the covers, back and front. I would, staple them together to make them like the real official long books. And you remember those, the anthologies?
Yeah.
So I would do that, and then I would I'd write all my own Garfield comics. So I had a ton of them. So imagine my surprise when I make this Garfield manga. I put it out as like a fake leak, like, oh, this is a real Japanese comic that exists somewhere, and it blew up online. It got like over 1 million hits. It got to the point where clients were saying, hey, maybe delete those because our name is like right there with you, and that's gonna be bad. And I talked to like an agent I have, and he was like, yeah, maybe delete them. They're still up on the DeviantArt, on my DeviantArt.
And if you
unbeknownst, nobody else knows. So I put all this stuff out. It blew up. Got like over 1 million hits. I'm like, oh, that's more than I thought. I don't know how good that is. And then I find out that the creator of Garfield, Jim Davis, actually saw it. He actually had a really funny response. He said, when he saw it, he said, at least he got the branding right. because I put like copyright pause like underneath the Japanese. So if you want to see what that is, literally the only place you can see it is on my DeviantArt profile. Yeah, Dave Rapoza. Go check it out.
There you go.
So that's a little exclusive thing, which was very exciting for me, even though it happened in the weirdest circumstance. Jim Davis, he sees me.
Jim Davis.
Cheers, Jim. Yeah.
Well, now let's bring it all back. So we've got Arcane Idol, original character challenge. We've given people tons of information on not only steps to take where sometimes you've got to fail to be successful and test out new things, but also tons of ways to bring personality and story to your characters.
Right.
Do you have any final tips that you would recommend to people for like as they get into character design, character development, like 3 things that they can do to be more successful in their task to create characters, whether for this challenge or just in general?
One thing that people ask me a lot about is how do you do a lot of work or stay consistent? I think one of the more important things is that you got to make a schedule for yourself. You got to, if you're starting out and you want to be great at what you do, make a schedule for yourself until that becomes routine. Set up a daily thing that you do. Because eventually, if the goal is to work in the field, you know, if that's the idea, then you got to become disciplined. That's the hardest part. So if you're starting out, you're trying to figure out how to do it. You see people who, you know, maybe you like my work or other people's work, and they're very prolific artists, and they're doing all this great stuff that you would really love to do. You have to set up a routine that you can follow or make yourself follow day to day so that it becomes your normal life. You know, the same thing as dress for the job you want. If you work for the job you want, you work as if you're working, eventually that's what you'll do. That's all I did, and that really helped. Other than that, specifically to characters, pay attention to people in your life. What draws your attention? What is interesting about a person? Somebody you see on the street, somebody you see in a magazine, movie, whatever, a character that's interesting to you. What about that person draws you in? That's how you create memorable characters, because you see memorable characters in your day-to-day life. There are people in your life, you know, I've mentioned a few in this, where that stand out in my memory. Why do they stand out? What was it about them? There's something there. And in this kind of design thing, it's more of how they look. Maybe it's something about their face. Maybe you feel a story there. Something's interesting. So whenever you can kind of hone in on that and you see it, pay attention to it and try and think about why that makes sense. What is it about this person that draws me in? If you pay attention to those things and you look for it all the time, it becomes easier to draw those things and paint those things because you're so used to having that visual library. And I would say the third thing, and this is more general, is to just know that if you come at this and you're worried about being anything, like you're feeling self-conscious, know that every single artist was in your exact position. I was. I started from, nothing. I wasn't even the best artist in my high school. There were people that were much better than me. And, I'm from a class of like 100 kids, and I might have been pretty good for my grade, but I never thought that I would get to do what I'm doing now based off of that, because that's not how it worked for me. I had to start and study every day, and I did that for years. And I still push myself so much. I don't want myself to rest on my laurels and just be comfortable. Comfort can kill you. So you just have to understand that no matter how amazing somebody might seem, an artist you look up to might appear, that at some point in their life they were just like you, and that it's all attainable. You don't have to hold yourself back or think that people are just inherently better than you. You just got to put in the work. There are people who put in more mileage, and it might seem like luck, and maybe part of it is, but luck also comes from work. So if somebody seems like they're in this amazing place, somewhere you would want to be, that's not from nothing, and that's effort. So it's all there for your grasp. You just need to let yourself kind of go down the boring road of doing hard work, even if it's awful. So much of what I did was drawing naked people very poorly. Now I draw incredible naked people. No, that's not how it worked. I'm so focused on nudity. No, that's not what I do. No, but I just improved. Repetition. And it doesn't, other people will see that you're improving before you do. You just got to put in the time. And you can beat yourself up as an artist, and most artists hate what they do. But it's just a long road, but it is attainable. And I'll say that just from me. Lots of people I looked up to, I never thought I would be doing what I'm doing now. And you just have to start, stay disciplined. I would say, just like going to a gym. It seems really difficult at first. You get the ball rolling though. Eventually, it becomes easier and easier and easier, and you might not see progress. But somebody who hasn't seen you in a couple months might. It's that kind of thing. So.
And to borrow from earlier, who knew that doing exercise would make you feel better?
That's right.
So you put in that work on art. You're going to start feeling better about your art, too.
Yep, you start walking. Eventually, you start breathing better. And then your lungs expand. And then...
Well, hey, thank you so much for joining us. If you're listening to this, fairly recently after it was released, you've still got about 2 weeks left on the Arcane Idol Challenge, so you can enter. We'll put the link below. Where can people find you online?
You can go to DaveRapoza.com to see my general portfolio. If you want to follow me on Twitter, I post a lot of sketches. Same thing on Instagram. It's just at Dave Rapoza on both. And yeah, that's pretty much it. And then if you want to buy the comics, you can go to SteveLichman.com. That's Lichman. Link in the description.
Yep, we'll put it below.
And yeah.
And also linked on DeviantArt. DeviantArt.com/Dave Rapoza. So thank you so much for joining us today, guys, and have a good one. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.